Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today we'll be discussing the first American economist. But before we do, there are 2 points of order we have to get out of the way. First of all, this gentleman would never have called himself an economist. That was not a job title back then. And to be fair, many people had several jobs, and if you were a leader at the time, then you had a lot to do with shaping the economy, whether or not you were purposely performing economics, so to speak. But second of all, today's subject is a man whose name I think is Tench Coxe. Now his last name is spelled C-O-X-E. I believe that's pronounced Coxe. It might be Cox, but I'm going to stick with Coxe. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you realize many of these obscure founders I've read a lot about, but have never heard anyone say before. So I am kind of on my own to determine how to pronounce it. I am going to call him Coxe. Tench actually is a fairly common first name during that late 18th century in colonial and then early America. I made a video, you can watch it here, about Tench Tillman, for example. I wanted to name one of my children Tench, but my wife did not let that happen. Anyway, they have other fine names. Anyway, Tench Coxe did have one of the largest roles to play in the shaping of the economy under the United States Constitution when it was first implemented. So a little background. Tench Coxe grew up in a fairly wealthy Philadelphia family, and he learned to be a part of his family's shipping house and made a tidy sum. Unfortunately, he was one of the people who tried to stay out of the war. He was more concerned on getting wealthy because it was always the American dream, even before there was America. And he wasn't really involved in politics. He was still in his early 20s when the revolution broke out. So he decides to step aside, and when the Continental Army takes over Philadelphia, he actually leaves and then returns when the British take back over. And then when the British leave and the Continental Army returns, Tench Coxe is arrested for treason. Fortunately, he had people in enough well-positioned places to be pardoned. Now, you're probably thinking, why would this traitor be a founder of the United States? Well, after the war was over, Tench, now in his early 30s, started getting involved in politics, and he was actually one of the few people sent, and the only representative from Pennsylvania who went to the Annapolis Convention. And just as a refresher, the Annapolis Convention was a meeting in 1786 of representatives from 5 states, and they were attempting to resolve issues with the Articles of Confederation, and their goal was to make adjustments, or at least recommended adjustments, to the Articles of Confederation that could help the young nation at large. And Tench, while he was here, became friends with Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, who were the driving force behind not only this convention, but a convention the following year, the Philadelphia Convention, or as we know it today, the Constitutional Convention. Now, Tench was not elected to the Constitutional Convention, but he did help found an organization that was called the Society for Political Inquiries. And it was kind of like an early think tank, where just influential people from Philadelphia and sometimes out-of-towners would meet to discuss the politics of the day and shaping not just the economy, but society at large. Now, on May 11th, 1787 was a Friday. And the following Monday, the Constitutional Convention was going to meet for the first time. And the Society for Political Inquiries had a meeting at Benjamin Franklin's house. And almost all of the delegates from Pennsylvania who were going to be attending the Constitutional Convention the following Monday were at this meeting. And the keynote speech was a speech delivered by Tench Coxe. And Tench his speech was titled, "A Commercial System for the United States." And he went through a whole plethora of ideas on how we could develop a better infrastructure to make the United States very wealthy. And I'll remind you, this is a time before the Constitution where most people were focused on their state. Not all the states, just their state. But Coxe had quickly developed himself into a leading nationalist, which there were many at the time. It might not have the best connotations necessarily today, but at the time, well, I guess it also didn't have the best connotations at the time. But at the time, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, even although he wasn't vocal about it, George Washington, were all becoming nationalists, or well, what they would start calling themselves in about a year, Federalists. So, during his speech, he discussed many things. The need to produce goods internally, the need for taxation for several reasons at the national or federal level. That would need to restore the public credit, because although some states had paid off their war debts, others were like really lagging behind. And what I find very interesting is he actually talked for length about manufactures and the use of new forms of power, including water power and steam power. Yes, on the eve of the Constitutional Convention, many of the delegates listened to a speech that discussed the need to develop steam power to increase productivity in the United States. And it's a great reminder that the American Revolution was concluding and the early Republic was just beginning right alongside the Industrial Revolution's beginning. So yes, there was steam power at this point, and some people were promoting the government's involvement in, I don't want to say promoting again, but getting people promoting the use of steam power. Now, what's super interesting about this, again, Coxe doesn't attend the Constitutional Convention, but he does, his speech, he does print up his speech and hand it out to the delegates of the Constitutional Convention as they're arriving. And many of the people here, not all of the people who went to the Constitutional Convention, wanted a federal government. Many of the ones from the smaller states took a lot of convincing. Some, the 2 of the 3 representatives from New York left because this is not what we wanted. But many of the people there did want some kind of more powerful federal government. And when they created this Constitution, they had the economic policies of Tench Coxe in their minds. And even more so, 2 years later, when Alexander Hamilton becomes Secretary of the Treasury for the first time, as the first Secretary of Treasury under George Washington, Tench Coxe is appointed as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. Tench Coxe was the first Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. And while Alexander Hamilton, he was brilliant, and he did, obviously, was his Treasury Department, but he was the politician, and Tench Coxe was the economist. And that's why, in my perspective, Tench Coxe is the first American economist, because it was his ideas and his writing and his speech that was in the hearts and minds of many of the people writing the Constitution, and then literally in the ear of Alexander Hamilton while the Treasury Department of the United States was first created. And while there have been many changes in the past 200 plus years, the basis of our current Constitution and our current economy really lies in the brains of Tench Coxe. It is amazing that less people know his name. Even more amazing that I can't figure out if I'm pronouncing it right or not. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please, if you did, hit like. I would really appreciate that. If you're new here, you just stumbled on this video, I put out 5 a week. Please hit subscribe. If you want to support this channel, check out the link to my Patreon page down below. Today's Friday. I won't be back with a regular video till Monday, but tomorrow, as with every Saturday, I will be doing a live video at 3 o'clock, and we will discuss the last several articles, the last week's worth of articles I wrote for my website, founderoftheday.com. So I really hope you can enjoy me. It's a fun time. You comment back. Sometimes I react live to what you're saying. I'll try always to. Thank you so much for watching, and I will come back and see you tomorrow.